I appreciate the opportunity to be with you for another podcast. As you know, every podcast starts with a word. And by way of introduction to today's guest, the word for the podcast is style. As you'll get to know Lindy Wishard, details matter. Lindy has not only degrees and expertise in design, style, but to me, style is a much bigger word. It's caring about the details of life. It's paying attention and being aware and leaning into the details, whether that's the details of a person's life, whether that's the details of a design, whether it's your effort in any situation. Was it well thought out? Was it your best effort? And so with that word and the person that I know whose company is Build with Style, thank you for being here. This is going to be a great adventure. I want you to take everybody back first, just so you just retold me the story of where we actually met, and it's somewhat humorous, and then we'll skip from there. Go ahead.
Yes, I had a house, and I had just bought my second house and suddenly realized I was a landlord and I didn't know anything about being a landlord, and I was asking brokers and mortgage lenders, people in town, where does one go to learn about real estate investing? And somebody said, do you know Greg Pinneo? And I said, no. So we were at the Linwood Convention Center, and you walked in late. I also walked in late. I think the whole auditorium was seated, waiting for you to come in.
Which is very unlike me, and yet I do remember that. For some reason, I don't know why. This was many years ago, 2007, 6, something like that.
Yeah.
I do remember. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I was late, because I'm pretty punctual.
And I don't even know if you were late, but like they were doing announcements, a little preamble.
Right.
And I asked you if you did this thing full time. I think that's what I said.
Hey, who are you? Do you do this full time? Yeah.
And I remember you were very kind. You took me by the hand and, got me a seat in the very crowded auditorium, and you just walked right up on stage.
And there we began. What a journey. And I can already tell, and I don't know quite why, but it's been
Yeah.
What a journey.
It has been a journey.
It's been a journey. And seeing you go from there to us sitting here now, so many years later, and knowing truly every step of the way of this incredible journey, it's just a privilege. So I want you to start by taking us back to what I consider to be a very, very different and eclectic way of being raised. Can you do that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
It was unusual. I grew up in what I always call the hippie commune. It wasn't a formal commune, but my parents were kind of too young to be true hippies, but they were hippie wannabes. And they had me when they were young, and they were friends with 2 other couples. So 6 adults, 3 men, 3 women. But the other couples never had children. And they all ended up going to school together, college, had me while they were in college, and then ended up buying homes within half a mile of each other. And I think maybe planned, maybe out of necessity, because they didn't have very much money, they just shared in the raising of me. You pick her up from school, you make sure she gets her homework, you make sure she has dinner, she got to ballet class. They were always kind of sharing in the responsibility of making sure that I was cared for. Mm-hmm. And they were also caring for each other too. Mm-hmm. They would fix up each other's homes. One of the couples built do you remember a pole barn style house? You could order the kit, get all the pieces, right, and you would literally, like old barn raising.
Right.
So one of the couples they built their home that way. And we built it in a weekend. The other couples came over, big party, lots of barbecue, and building these houses. But it was that way for everything. Gardens, canning, splitting firewood for the winter. They just helped each other because they liked it, they could, and they kind of needed to. But in that environment, I think the thing that I got is just 6 incredibly smart but incredibly creative people who built things. And in the process, it wasn't unusual for me to stain some windows, cut some lumber for a project. Can you paint this thing? It was just part of growing up. And for me, it was fun. And it's amazing to have 6 people love and dote on you.
I was going to say it seems so different, and yet from a kid's perspective, the benefit of 6 wanting, capable people helping give you different influences and different perspectives and different things to think on. I've thought many times, how is it that you are so well-rounded and you're so smart, and it feels like you've seen so much, but to me, in part, this explains it. I think it's a very, very unusual but amazing way to be raised.
I think that saying, "It takes a village," is true.
It was a village that raised you, and I think that that's amazing. And from there, you left and you had some really interesting first jobs, college, and walk through some of that, because I think it does underscore too your love of art, design, and style, and walk through some of that, because it's sort of a segue into real estate, I think.
Yeah, I think everything leading up to real estate was preparation for Build with Style and for the projects that I've taken on. And really, I would credit it with my biological mom and dad. My mom is very corporate America, big business. She was a labor negotiator, HR manager, very driven and organized in that way. My dad, artist, designer, big picture thinker, visionary, could see like the vision for whatever it might be, crazy parties, property with trails like a state park. He had a vision for his environments. So I think I got a nice mix of both of those. So as a kid, like I said, we didn't have a ton of money. So everything I did, and that was early on, my very first business was making marionette puppets. And I would sell them at the school craft fairs and local flea markets and places I could find to produce them. And that worked really well up until the point that my labor source got bored of my friends got tired of making puppets for me.
Your labor source.
Yeah.
I.e. friends.
Friends. That I clearly didn't pay enough.
Right.
So that turned into, just every opportunity to create a business or a job or make money in an entrepreneurial way I did. Starting with puppets to I helped create a theater organization on the dump property. Our neighborhood had a landfill. The landfill didn't like being the landfill, so they were trying to do things that were good for the community. And on one end, I think there's kind of a golf course that abuts the property, but then they wanted to build a theater for the community on the other end of the dump. Well, that's cool, right? So I got to help them in their planning process and what does it need to look like and how are we going to run it.
It's kind of an outdoor theater, like an amphitheater.
Kind of an outdoor amphitheater kind of situation.
Yeah.
So that was fun. When I was in college, I found a little office in one of the buildings and I just loved this little space. It was at the top of this really quintessentially, European designed, inspired building, like up in the attic kind of thing. And it had one little window that looked right over the center commons, and it was just a beautiful space, and it was empty. And so I started using it.
Squatting.
Yes, for sure. And then suddenly, people kind of figured it out after a while. And so I said, well, can I run a little business out of here? I'll write resumes for the other students. So I started writing resumes just as a way to keep my office.
Right.
And then then I decided arts administration was really the direction I was going to go, because I loved the idea of theater and fine art. And the college had a degree in arts administration, but they only had it for music. They didn't have it for fine art and theater, because they didn't really have a fine arts program. So I went to the administration and said, look, you don't really offer this degree I want, but I can help you make it. Let me take these classes at this other university.
I already have an office.
Yeah, I have an office. I want to write my own degree program.
Right.
So they let me do that. And, I was always kind of doing things that were not normal. So as a junior in college, you're supposed to do an internship, or you're allowed to, I guess, and get credit for it. But I didn't want, that was too far away. So when I was a freshman, I was trying to get an internship at a local museum in Indiana, our Contemporary Art Center. And I was already taking classes there because I had been trying to create this degree program with the two universities together. So I remember going to the director of the museum, and it was a private-public combination. And I went to the director and said, I'd like to be your assistant. And he said, well, I don't really have a job for you. I can't really pay you, and I can't give you credit because you're not old enough for me to give you credit. And I was like, well, whatever, I'll just do it. And so he let me kind of be his right hand, his Ryan. And I did that for about a year. And in the second year, an incident happened where he had to leave the campus very unexpectedly and on very short notice. And the administration was going through a bunch of changes. Anyway, they gave me his job, and it was supposed to be temporary, a few weeks, turned into a few months, turned into a few years. I kept that job all through college and a couple of years beyond college.
Wow.
And that was really a great opportunity for me to learn how to write grants, for me to learn how to curate exhibitions, recruit artists from all over the world to exhibit at the museum. I very quickly realized that not only in order for the museum to really function, it had to be bringing in its own revenue as opposed to just relying on university funds. So I was curating exhibitions that I could then turn around and rent to other universities or other museums. And it was through that kind of process of being able to know, okay, let's talk about what sort of exhibit would somebody want. And it was an experience. The way I enjoyed museums was walking into an environment. All different kinds, some with paintings, some with sculptures, some with a combination, some perfumeries. We brought in an artist who built an entire exhibition out of woven willow, but you could walk through it, like a cave made out of wood. But what I loved about the museum was I could clear the canvas, I could make it blank, we'd paint all the walls white, and then I got to start over. And I got to see a vision of what am I going to put in it to create an experience for the customer as they're walking through the museum. And it was a lot of practice.
So, something you said that I wanna extract whether it was innate or whether it was just fate, but I think it was very deliberate. You put yourself in position for possibilities to happen. I know I'm too young. I know I can't get paid. I know I don't get credit for this, but I'm going to be here. I'll just do it anyway. They say, and maybe it's just in my world, if you want to be a pilot, hang out at the airport. It's that kind of thing. You you have to be available when opportunity happens. And I can't tell you how many people have said, well, this or that, it's my passion. And I go, well, then you need to be hanging around that. You need to just be there and be around it and be around those who are around it and learn the language and learn who's in charge and learn the nuances and just be the fly on the wall that's very paying attention. And there you were as this young freshman, but knowing I really want to know more about this, so I'm going to be there. Showing up is about half of success, I think, sometimes.
I agree.
And there you were. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, you're running it. You're getting paid. And now after college, it's your job. Mm-hmm. And what a segue to so many things that could come after that. This museum, if you think of it metaphorically, was sort of a blank slate that you got to create the culture. Mm-hmm. Overlay that with your world of development. It's not just a building, but it blends into a culture in an area, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's an environment and it's an experience. Mm-hmm. I think that's why people enjoy going to Las Vegas mm-hmm. or a European vacation, because you can put yourself in an environment that sometimes natural, sometimes man-made, but you have a physical experience when you're surrounded by a certain environment. Mm-hmm. Even here at this airplane hangar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, you create an environment around you, or you go seek an environment mm-hmm. for the experience. Mm-hmm. No question about it. I remember so many of the various deals we've looked at and ideas that we've thrown around, and we'll get to so many different projects today, but one picture you showed me once was it was a community of Airstream trailers in a couple acre piece of property with boardwalks mm-hmm. and gardens connecting this whole community of trailers that you could rent by the night, these beautiful Airstream trailers in this beautiful setting. And it was a community in the center, sort of fire pit in the Adirondacks and it was just a scene that would create an experience. And isn't that what's valuable? In our
Absolutely.
life, aren't we looking for scenes that create positive experience to say this is a measure of the quality of life? I've spent a lot of time in scenes that create value, mm-hmm. right?
It's moments.
Moments.
And
yeah.
I think that word came from you. That idea of we're trying to create moments. We all live 24 hours a day, mm-hmm. but you remember special moments. Mm-hmm. And I think special moments are your environment, mm-hmm. your experience, the people you're with.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to me, that's a part of this word style. It's knowing what you resonate with and being true to that call, that place. That could be the people you're around, the settings you find yourself in. If the canvas of life is blank, you get to decide how it's painted, how it's laid out. And when you are seeking moments, there's common threads that you learn about yourself, that when these things are in place, moments happen.
Yeah.
And when these things are not in place, moments don't happen. And I think that that's a part of living a deliberate life, is knowing your style, knowing yourself. I'm so fascinated by the understructure of anything that you see come out of the ground in a life. Like, okay, here's what I see, but what was the understructure of it? Where were the beginnings? Mm. What were you observing as a kid in this village of young, wonderful people influencing you? How did you get formed to then create what you create? I think that those questions are worth asking. And so let's skip back to now you're a young landlord that now has a house, and you're wanting to learn more about real estate as a landlord. Somehow you got my name, and okay, here's this seminar that led to an opportunity of joining this community called Power Players. Tell me about your first Power Players experience. By the way, maybe I should say first, I know you've been to Power Players. You've been a TA at Power Players. I've lost track how many times. I'm going to say 4 or 5. Yeah. You've been to pretty much everything that I've ever done in the last 17 years.
Yeah, that's
Right.
accurate.
That's pretty much it. So, but that first Power Players experience and joining that community, tell me about that from your perspective.
Boy, okay. So Power Players for me, the first time was, I mean, it's just such a wonderful experience, and it's so hard to describe. In fact, I'm not even going to try to describe it, but it sets the stage for what is possible in real estate. And for me, in where I had been in my life to date, it really resonated with me. Your approach, the people that were in attendance. Though some of those people are some of my very best friends today. And certainly the Power Players community are almost all my very best friends today. So I think that says a lot about the people who are...
Mine too.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, mine too. I'm lucky. I wonder how they let me in. I really do. But,
we put up with you.
Yeah, I know you do. And it was in a sunny climate. I can picture it. But was it Cayman or
Yes,
was it
it was
Maui?
Cayman.
Cayman, okay.
It was the Cayman Islands, and wow, yeah, it is a life-changing experience. And since then, having now TA'd a variety of times, I feel like we've seen it all. I've seen people quit their jobs. I've seen people get divorced. I've seen people get together. the whole range of emotion. And because I think when you're put in a place where you're really challenged to think about what you've accomplished with your life, are you satisfied with the status quo? Power Players is really good at framing your history and your future and allowing you to make a decision about what your status quo is going to be. And I think so you leave with the term, disturbed.
Wonderfully
disturbed.
Yeah. Jim Rohn, who we both know and love, many years ago, I wrote it down, and I can't tell you what speech. He gave so many amazing speeches, but he said that the precursor to all significant change is disgust. And wow, I remember reading that going, oh, that doesn't sound good. Who wants to be disgusted? But that can be your best day, is to say, I've got more in me than what I've currently been showing. I have more ability, or I have desires or talents or verses that have not lived. And I'm a little ashamed of myself for not bringing those forward. That's the first step to significant change. Is I can be more. I can be better, and it's that can be a hard day, but it can also be your very best day. And I love, and you've witnessed that aha many times in the kitchen of Power Players. We see that aha where people recognize that, wow, I can go a whole different route and contribute to the world around me, myself, much more than I have been. And go explore, what am I really capable of? And so you went from this first house, and give me, I think there's a time that when people come back from Power Players, it has to really soak in, has to really process. Like, okay, what does this mean and where am I going to take this? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does that sound similar to your experience coming back?
Oh, for sure. I spent 4 years post Power Players not really doing real estate. Kind of like had a different company. I was running a web design and development company that was pretty successful. And I remember thinking, like, I like this real estate thing. I clearly have this direction, but I was a little bit hesitant. And I think it's that idea of getting out of your own way. It can be hard. And so since then, I don't know if you remember, but you know, your circle about your beliefs and
the mindset model.
The mindset model. So, you know, once you start on the model, I think I often think about the model because, you know, we went from single family homes to apartments to building townhouses to building, you know, beautiful luxury product. And all of that was you learn a little bit, you expand your belief, you expand your toolbox, you get better results, you go around the circle again. So I think right out of Power Players, those first few years was just a little bit of getting out of my own way.
Which is, I think that this is a process that never ends. I believe that completely, that growth never ends. It shouldn't ever end. And therefore, once we start that, the gears are in motion, we start working at it, and sometimes there's some undoing before we can go forward. There's some rethinking before we can build again. And not unusual to process, but you definitely got going from there.
Yeah, and sometimes the world happens, you need a little help.
Right.
So really, it was meeting Brett and realizing that, you know, Brett's my business partner, and it was meeting Brett, and I think both of us approaching real estate investing and developing together, having a real similar mindset around that, that we started doing the first, acquisitions together.
Yeah. And I've been very, very privileged to be very much a part of that journey once you and Brett came together and really got going. Not the very, very first couple projects, but when it started getting momentum, that's been very, very rewarding. One of the motivators, you know, here's what we do is one question, but the why do we do it? Why? What is all this funneling toward? And if I remember right, way back when in your intake form for Power Players, there was this notion that you put out there that something that was very, very important to you was what you called the someday house.
Yes.
The someday house, and this is where the design, the setting, the vibe, what you visualized happening there was very, very clear in your mind, and this is what motivated you to continue to grow and learn and from a financial standpoint, you know, build to work toward this space and place that you saw in your mind.
Yes.
Can you give me the evolution of the someday house and where it started, and well, if it's coming together, where's that, or has it completely come together yet? I want to hear about that, because that was a big driving force.
Yeah, it has really been a motivating factor for a long time. Okay, so it starts with kindergarten, I think. My parents, my dad, the artist with the big vision, and my mom, Miss Practical, they bought a farmhouse, and they decided that they were going to build their own home where the farmhouse stood. So they bought 2.5 acres, beautiful piece of property. They tore the existing farmhouse down to the studs and the foundation, and they were going to rebuild this. And they had this vision in their minds that they were going to do it themselves, even though they had jobs and me and knew nothing about construction. So when I remember kindergarten, first day of school, getting ready for school in 2 tents in our backyard because my parents had torn down the house, and walking to the bus, getting out of the tent, going to the bus. And I didn't think anything of it. It was kind of cool. We were just camping in the backyard. And then camping turned into, like, winter was coming. My mom was getting a little concerned that we didn't have a roof. So that turned into a trailer in the backyard. That turned into, like a year or two before they got framing and insulation up. Then we lived in the upstairs. There was no kitchen. But it wasn't necessarily because they were, like, poor. It was that they were determined that they were going to do this themselves. So evenings and weekends were spent building this house. And they spent the next 20 years building this house and putting things in and then going, oh, we don't like that, or that's not right, or, then they tear it back out and do it again. It was always a construction site, which meant there was drywall dust everywhere. It meant that, there was plastic cordoned off, sections of the house because
we're working on
this part. It was like a 20-year construction zone. But all of those years growing up in that house, I learned a lot about work ethic. I learned a lot about creativity. I learned a lot about the importance of craftsmanship and discussions. We had open discussions about what does a water heater cost, and okay, we could be taking a vacation, but instead we're going to put in a new drain field, or all the things that go into a home, but also project management.
Right. Wow. It was part of the vision an undertaking that looked different than that process? Or was there real romance in the 20-year project?
I don't know.
I've done a 10-year project like that, living in it for 10 years. I kind of thought it's one thing to do it and you drive to the job site and work on it. It's another thing when you're living in it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could ask them, but I'm not sure.
Do they still have it? Do they live there? Did they sell it?
My dad built that house and was living in it until just very recently. He passed away on Monday. So that's been
Your dad passed away on Monday.
Yes. Yeah, so I know, I can't believe it, but
how do I feel so bad. I don't know
No,
that.
that's okay.
I know he was not well. But,
yes,
oh my gosh.
I know. It's part of the journey.
Yeah. And I drank beer with my dad last night, who's 88. And all I could think of when he left here was thank God for that last 2 hours. Because,
You never know.
it feels like it's coming.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But, well, these things form you. And
They do. Even as a youngster, I remember having an apartment and, that same idea of creating a space and an environment and making it cool and, any opportunity to create something that evokes an experience. And I think one of the things that I always get from listening to you talk about being unique and not wanting to be like everyone else. I think coming out of that experience of 20 years of my parents building their vision, I noticed that as I look at properties and opportunities, I just get so aggravated at the box builders that are building townhouses that all look the same. You couldn't tell if who built which one, even though we know them. Or the spec houses.
Right.
They're cookie cutter communities that all look the same. No one wants to be like. No one wants to be a number, a commodity. And I feel like housing in our world has really moved into that idea of commodity.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I feel like it's not just housing. It's the way we look, the way we present ourselves. This sort of fake image of I'm accepted because I look like everybody else. I drive the same little SUV. I that. It all. Who would spend $45,000 on a 4-door, Ford Taurus, when for 25,000 you could buy a 1968 Mercedes with a white steering wheel?
I agree 100%.
I just,
but it's
I
the
don't
world
get
we
it.
live in.
Yeah, I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. But a lot of things don't make sense. Lindy, you evolved through some acquisitions, got going, some acquisitions of existing product like military, road, and did some major renovations of houses and buildings.
Yes.
Walk me through the world of renovations and maybe contrast that with the world of new construction, which you are also very, very gifted at. Start with renovations.
Sure.
What were some of the takeaways, some of the big lessons that you have logged in about major renovations?
My experience has been when I walk into a home, even if it's full of garbage, even if the roof is caving in, I walk into a home, I try to do it when nobody else is there. Early in the morning, late at night, late-ish in the day. It still has to be daylight. You have to be able to see. But I try to go and I try to give myself enough time to just stand in each room and feel it. Like, if I lived here, or if somebody I loved lived here, what would this room need to be? Is this a den? Does it have enough light? Does it open up to a bathroom? Does it need a closet? Like, I try to imagine living in every space the way I would want to live in the space. And so I think about the light, I think about the storage, I think about the finishes. And then I'll take my sketchbook and I'll draw the floor plan out, top-down view of how I think the family or the user of that home is going to flow through it. And that's the moment where I'm like, okay, obviously I don't want to tear down walls. I don't want to replace things I don't have to. I want to be economical about my approach, but I also want it to make sense. And because I love design, I spend a fair amount of time and I have a lot of knowledge about product availability, what product costs, what's on trend, what's not on trend, what's coming. Key that I have found is I watch design trends coming out of London because they're about 3 to 4 years ahead of the United States. So by the time something's popular in London, it'll start to show up in New York, LA. It'll be a few more years before we start to see it in the Pacific Northwest, and even, a couple more years beyond that, we'll start to see it in the Southeast. But I'm always trying to watch where's the design trend going and staying out ahead of that.
Interesting. The world of real estate, it's this huge umbrella. Oh my gosh, everything from parking lots to nightly rentals to high rises to mobile home parks. I mean, it just couldn't be a bigger umbrella.
Sure.
And you've tackled the world of single family well. You've tackled the world of multifamily and luxury multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
That range of experience brings you into all kinds of questions, and there's like a world that I want to explore, and we've made an outline that there's so much to look at that I want to make sure that we're on task.
Okay.
Let's talk about some new construction projects where maybe there's a tear down, maybe it's vacant land, but you're going to visualize something brand new.
Sure.
With your experience of building many buildings from the ground up, the evolution of due diligence, the coming in saying, okay, I think I see what I'm getting into, and I've properly weighed it, priced it, et cetera, I've considered it. That's obviously what we all want to do, but sometimes you learn those lessons, not having seen it, and now you see it once you're in motion. Give me some of the lessons you've learned about just how you look at the palette of possibility. How has that checklist increased over the years?
That is a good question, and it is a big question. Mm-hmm. I have seen lots of developers who have spreadsheets of due diligence items, and all of those are true. You have to know your zoning, you have to know your population density, you have to know what's allowable, setbacks, height restrictions, water main extensions, all of this stuff you need to know. But I would say in addition to that, there's also a bit of an element of, I look at what's around. What's the market need? What's specific to this block? Is there townhouses and we really need something that looks a little different? Does the community need mixed use? I try to look at it from the perspective of not just here's this piece of land that's zoned this and therefore I can build X. I try to look at it from that perspective, of course, but also, is there a market? Can I do something that's a little bit different? And I think it's that uniqueness. And even going back to like the single family homes and the idea of knowing what's on trend, it goes back to, I think people don't want to be a vanilla box, a pottery barn. People want to be unique and have individual style and aesthetic. And I think that that's true even in the new construction. So when I look at a site, obviously it has to check all those boxes, but it also has to be like, would my target audience, let's say it's a first-time home buyer, Amazon, they've been there 2 years, they get their signing bonus, and now they're ready to buy their first home. Okay, what does that buyer want? Where do they want to be? Do they want access to the bus line? What's their price point? What's important to them? Those are questions that I'm asking.
Those are almost like sociological questions versus hardcore construction, doability, cost questions.
Yes.
And I think you're right that everything we do has to have an audience that receives it.
For sure.
And to me, the property, it starts with the property, but then you start saying, okay, now I'm going to ask all these questions about, you're an infill person.
Yeah.
You're not a sprawl person. You're not the next freeway off-ramp. Talk to me about that decision right there, because to me there's a big distinction between, some people think developers and like, okay, I'm going out to the next ring and I'm going to do something. You've come right into the heart of existing neighborhoods. Riff on that for a minute, because I think it's an important distinction.
Well, I have historically always bought in places I am. Neighborhoods I walk with my dog, places that I know well, and communities that I know well and love. So as somebody who embodies those environments, I am always thinking, what is my target audience for this product? Like, let's take the Mix, for example. Greenwood, just north of Seattle. Beautiful site, for townhouses, but there's a lot of townhouses up there. So what's going to make this townhouse different? My audience, first-time home buyer, Amazon, single, almost all of them. What do they want? Well, going back to that idea of, well, they don't want necessarily to look like everything else. So 16 units, we did 3 totally different aesthetics in that building, and we marketed them as personalities. So one was boho, one was glam, one was Scandinavian was really minimal. Boho had all kinds of cool boho finishes. Glam was like off the chart, black and white everywhere. But is that idea of like wanting to give buyers something that made them unique. And we even made little buttons that said, I'm Scan or I'm Glam. And what's funny is when people would come tour that property, they immediately knew what they were. And it was very quick. They would say, well, yeah, just show me the Glam units. Or I only want to see Scan.
I think that this again comes in place from the notion that we're wired as a unique individual.
Yes.
We're not like, well, we've got 16 units of the same, so what does it really matter what unit? I couldn't agree more.
But like one more community where there's 3 shades of brown and 2 shades of gray. So over it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I make fun of the new is not for you in the production developments. It's like, oh, you got to pick your colors. It's between oyster, bone, alabaster, and off-white.
Yes.
Which one do you want?
Pure beige.
Right. Beige. Right.
Hot pink.
Right. Exactly. Right. In terms of your development work, and everything's a progression. You talk about the laps around the track of the mindset model. You get results, beliefs grow, abilities grow, confidence grows, intention grows, and the next lap is more capable and a bigger scale of yourself.
Sure.
You've certainly taken a lot of laps. Talk to me about dealing the factors that you've learned about development, that as much as you try to control every due diligence and every item, give me a few things that have come up that you didn't see coming.
There are a million.
The book.
There is a gigantic book. And I think that is the challenge of speculative development. And in-city provides a whole nother set of challenges. The political environment has its set of challenges. So okay, let's see. Geez, there's so many. Greenwood, bioswale. Seattle Department of Transportation did an experimental project about 20 years ago where they decided to make a very unique bioswale that ran along the street where our development was.
A ditch.
An open ditch.
With grass.
Some plants in it.
Right.
and
we knew... A sacred ditch with grass.
Yeah. And we knew it was there. We knew what the setbacks were. But all of a sudden, we're in permitting, and they're like, oh, you don't just have a ditch. You have a SDOT Department of Natural Resources special ditch. Well, who would have ever guessed that certain ditches are special and others aren't?
Right.
You don't know. That was a challenge.
And these are not only challenges to understand, but usually the challenges we're talking about create huge project delays, huge project expenses that seem so ridiculous and illogical.
Well, we had to move the whole building because the thought there was, as the developer, in this particular instance, we were required to extend the sidewalk along the frontage of the property, very standard. It was in my pro forma. What we did not anticipate was having to extend the sidewalk along the ditch because there was a ditch. So now there's no room for the sidewalk. So the whole building had to shift over. Okay, fine. That was terrible, but we got through that. No, they have to be able to cross the ditch. Well, what do you mean they have to be able to cross the ditch?
called-
There's an intersection right there where they can cross. No, over your property they have to cross the ditch. Just, I think every day it is just a challenge like that.
Right. Yeah.
Some amount of ridiculousness.
I remember one site where, the very clear due diligence checklist is obviously to meet with all of the departments having to do with utilities. And let's make sure we've got sewer on this street, make sure the depth of the sewer is there, that we've got gas, that we've got water. It's all there. You meet with the departments, they're all checked off. They all go, yep, we've got it. You're all good there. They issue the building permits. This was an 8-unit building on Capitol Hill. And okay, we're like ready to bring cleaning people in to clean this thing. We need running water, and so you're calling to get the meter hooked up, and they go, okay, well, yeah, we can definitely do that, but we've done a little check on things, and the size of the water line that's in the street is too small to accommodate this building you've now built. And I just remember the silence. I remember the phone call that was like, what do you mean? We've been through this like 2 years ago. We've met with you. It's right here.
The building was built.
The building's built. It's all done. We're literally needing to clean it and get it on the market. And it's like, well, no, we're not going to allow that to happen until you sign an agreement that you're going to upsize the water line on the street. And it was just like, oh, and call us back when you figure out what you want to do. Hang up. There's just no negotiating. There's no leverage. There's no anything. You're sitting there on a building done with debt service of construction costs and holding costs and no ability to sell, and you're stuck. And it's out of your control. And so what do you have to do? You have to go sign a paper that says, all right, I'll upgrade the water line, and just roughly, how much was that?
$600,000.
$600,000. Oopsie. It's like, but there's no sense of we've messed up, we're involved in this, let's work it out together. No, it's the ultimate, you either do it or your building's just going to sit there the way it is permanently.
Well, I mean, I was so naive. There was a period of time, maybe 10 years, where I felt like, no, people do the right thing. Like, this is wrong. I'm going to go to the city. I'm going to explain to them how wrong this is. Surely, like, a rational person will see that we did everything right and this is crazy. And yeah, we got a law firm involved. And what I learned is that the city does not care.
Yeah.
They are not rational.
No.
And they're not using their own money. So
That's
you
it.
can try to defend all you want, but
Right.
they have endless pockets
Yeah.
and taxpayer dollars, and they don't care at all. So somebody decides they want something, and it's impossible to fight. But I remember going into that thinking, surely this doesn't make any sense. Surely
Right.
this is a mistake.
Why would you issue a permit if
Yeah.
we can hook this up? We've talked to you. It was all fine.
Yes.
The accountability piece, even if you have detailed notes of meetings prior, again, there's a risk involved. That the goalposts will change.
Yeah.
And that's one for sure. Talk about economies.
Yeah.
From acquisition of dirt to bringing something out into the marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for the last 10 years, the market has gone up. Mistakes happen, but the market always kept up with any mistakes. So that notes taken and learned, and we move on to the next thing. But this last project is a great example where we bought the dirt right before COVID, literally 4 months before COVID hit Seattle. And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. We had anticipated a 2-year turn for permits. Turned out to be much longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
We had planned for being able to get construction rolling sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Did not expect that. Record inflation, difficult getting product, not being able to get windows,
Mm-hmm.
name like one challenge after another. And then
Concrete
suddenly,
strike.
oh yeah, the concrete strike.
Right.
Jeez,
Yeah.
who thought that was happening? I was so mad.
Mm-hmm.
We were pouring the the post-tension deck,
Mm-hmm.
on the day the concrete strike happened.
Right. Here's my take on this, and I want this audience to hear this so literally. The world of hardcore development, complicated projects, beautiful projects. You've built some just unbelievable projects, parking garages and multi-story and elevators and as fancy and gorgeous as you could possibly make. Projects like this are not for the faint of heart. You have to be borderline crazy to take one on.
Yeah.
And so and I could elaborate in 100 different ways what I mean by that, but I think you get a feel for this, that there's so many factors that are out of your control, and then to end to saying, okay, now we're done. Now let's hope that there's a market there. Let's hope that interest rates are where we want them to be. Let's hope that the receptivity that was when we bought the ground is still there. All of those things aside, it feels like in most cases the deck, there's so many things to have to go right that it's kind of a miracle if something lands really solidly on its feet. Knowing that, and I don't know of a developer who would disagree with that.
Yeah.
What is it in you that says, I've signed up for this many times over and over again? What is that drives you to continue to create against a lot of odds that seem to be stacked against you?
I think for me, it's it goes right back to creating beautiful spaces, beautiful environments, and beautiful communities. Like growing up in that village environment really stressed to me how important a community is, even a physical community. So a townhouse development designed around a center courtyard where people have to know their neighbors. You can't just pull into the garage in your SUV and close the door and never talk to anybody. Right. No, it's not a subdivision like that. It's a designed to encourage people to commute with one another. And I think that is so important. I almost feel like it is like my mission to create experiences, environments, places for people to inhabit that are beautiful, that allow them to have moments. And I think that's good not just for those people, but I think that's good for cities. That's good for towns. That's designing beautiful things. When I look at what's out there and I look at what we've built, I'm really proud of the product. It stands out. It's different. You can go, oh yeah, Lindy built that.
Yeah. I remember a discussion not so long ago about how to continue doing this kind of thing that you so believe in and you're so gifted at, but to take out some of the risk of what can and usually does challenge big infrastructure development. Yeah. And I remember, just talking about your thoughts around, for example, an RV park. And immediately you had thoughts around something that looked more like Ladd's Addition in Portland, or this. It's not just rows of RVs, but they're all centered around a center courtyard. There's the fire pit, the gazebo, and tracks and trails, so that it was immediately a vision of a community that all worked together, and it was so apparent that there's just nothing about cha-ching, 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 cha-ching that works for you. It comes back to me to your roots of this community that raised you, that there was cooperation. There was an attitude of we've got this together kind of thing. And isn't that something that seems so missing these days, in so many ways? And so it's how to blend that with the realities of development and finance, the risk of selling something at the end versus, okay, I'm going to keep this and control this environment over time.
This last project, I mean, because of the market, because of COVID, because of all the things, it knocked me on my butt. And it's been challenging.
Almost 5 years.
Yeah.
Of literally swimming upstream in a heavy current.
Yeah.
It feels like there's just been no slack water at all.
No. And
who does that other than somebody who's just completely committed to this vision? And yet, it's at the same time, what's sustainable is to try to do things that work on every level, right? I mean, finishing, there should be more to success than just I'm at the end of it and I'm alive.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Right? It seems like it. But that being said, I take my hat off to you, to Brett, having just literally stayed the course to finish this project. Tell me about another project, which, again, not for lack of desire, perhaps, but that is a project that you've decided to not move forward with, which is Hemingway. We call Hemingway.
Sure.
An amazing piece of dirt, but some of the obstacles that came up, I don't want to say early on because you were heavy in the due diligence period, but it became such that this looks like the hill you're going to die on. Do you really want to die on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Walk through some of that project. Because another absolutely stunning location, a stunning design.
Yeah.
Like
no
almost
other.
break your heart that building isn't built design.
Yeah.
And yet, talk about some of those challenges and obstacles.
Yeah. It is a heartbreaker. I stand on that site and I look out at the church. It overlooks a ravine and then a church on the other side of the ravine. And it is so exciting. You can imagine what this building is going to look like over this green belt to the church. But that green belt was one of the biggest challenges, because while all of the due diligence was done, what was not factored in was that there was a single piece of residential zone on the opposite side of the green belt. Did not factor it in, not touching, not contiguous. In permitting, the city of Seattle went, oh, wait a minute. We can't put you through an expedited design review process because you're across the green belt, which is kind of no man's land, and we're going to consider this residential piece over here as part of the consideration of the site, which meant full design review process, hearings, board reviews, public hearings. And as you can imagine, now we're another year or more into permitting just to get through that cycle. And at that point now, the building, the design and the integrity of the design is being degraded because now it's designed by committee. The neighbors want setbacks here, they want corrugated this, they want no windows on this side because they want to protect their privacy, but the environmentalists want light to reflect off this thing, and
Or some neighbors just went, I don't want it at all,
I don't want it at all.
and I'm own a law firm and I'm going to fight you to the end, right?
We had that too.
Right? Yeah, right,
Yeah, for free because I can.
right,
Yeah.
right.
No, I mean, and that's the city process. And I think part of it is, while I might think some of it is wrong and unfair for the developer, I also understand that that is the process that our city has put into place. What becomes challenging is, there are gotcha moments. There's a lot of gray area in the code, things that are subjective. And you think, well, I've seen variances for 6 feet here, or a construction variance for us to do staging equipment on the backside. In other sites, surely we can get it on this site. Somebody knows somebody, and suddenly the answer is no. Okay, great. I can't have scaffolding on the back of the building. I can't get a crane back there. So swing stage across the top of the building? Sure, I could do that.
Zip lines?
But at what cost?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's almost that, it almost sounds like a fiction novel when you start talking about conflicts with neighbors over crane easements and of course buying anything where there's any structure there and you need to remove the tenants to clear that. Well, that's a whole nother can of worms that it may never happen as a result of that.
Yeah.
Getting somebody out, if they know the right buttons to push, there's so much involved. Does the politics of this particular city, does it make you think in terms of your development that you would want to migrate to a city that is more entrepreneurial, more development,
Yes.
pro-development?
Yes.
Because I've seen other cities in the country that development is encouraged, not only from a city level, but literally from incentives and tax incentives and all sorts of things to come here and develop and do your thing. I think that's a very real thing these days, is to research where do you go where business wants you.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and we can talk about that. A couple of years ago, after all of the things and all of the projects in Seattle, we very deliberately made the shift to North Alabama. And the idea is, of course, you do all your due diligence, your market, inbound migration, where employers are going, where corporate centers are being developed, where they're being encouraged by municipalities with tax incentives. I think I read, I don't know, I showed you maybe 30 comp plans of cities all across the country looking at their 30-year growth plan. And I didn't see any as comprehensive, as well thought out, not overly complicated as Huntsville's. And that's where we decided to go.
That's where we went. Let's talk about Huntsville, because there was I think a combination involved there, at least the makings of what might be the someday house.
Sure.
And certainly the economic opportunities that you saw there. I was blessed to be involved in that transition in part, which is a whole separate story, I suppose. But tell me about Huntsville. Tell me about the Elkhorn Ranch and how that came to be, and the website that you have, the Facebook following of that particular awesome project.
Yeah. So we found a property in Huntsville that sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes your heart just kind of tells you. And a beautiful parcel outside of Huntsville, about 30 minutes, very similar feeling to Woodinville here. And house, older home built 40 years ago, added on to and renovated about 12 years ago. At a very specific style. It has a very lodge kind of feel to it. It is not in its current form or in the form that it was sold to us. That was not my vision for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I very quickly saw the vision of what I imagined it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've been working on that process since. And it's not going to be a fast process.
Mm-hmm.
People say, oh, you're renovating a home. It's going to take you a year. Well,
this one could
This
literally take a lifetime of
yeah,
continued doing it the way you want to do it.
yeah, for sure.
But what a palette.
Yes, it is the perfect canvas for all my creativity, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a really special place.
That's awesome. I just think it's fantastic that I was telling somebody the other day that the structure and what you see here, it can all change. I mean, we could tear it down and start over. The piece of property and what's immediately surrounds you.
Mm-hmm.
This is what can't change.
Yeah.
And this is where, when you're building a forever home or you're building something that's what I would call an Oz property,
Mm-hmm.
boy, do you pay attention on what you can't change.
Yes.
Because as logical as it might sound that, oh, I'm just going to approach the neighbor and I'll put a new roof on their house because I can't stand looking at it, or I'll clean this up at that forum, I can just do that. Well, they may say, get off my property.
Mm-hmm.
They may not want you to do that. And so it's what you can't change that surrounds you, and the land itself. I've seen so many amazing, beautiful structures built on pieces of dirt that you go, what are you thinking? This is a 6-lane road, and you are building a $2 million house here. It's a 6-lane road, and there's a AM PM across the street. What are we thinking? I see that a lot. I just can't believe it. But the Elkhorn, the piece of property, and the palette of structures that are on there, like nothing else I've ever seen. It's just, but see, style. There's that word again. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you see it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that it has at least the makings of the forever home. That's fantastic. If you were sitting down with, let's say I'm going to get very specific. Let's say that this is I'm actually thinking of a few power players who are young in their experience,
Mm-hmm.
but full of brains and full of energy and ready to roll. Given a seasoned perspective on real estate entrepreneurship, give me some bullet points, some things that you would say, I want you to process this and this and this and this. Some tips, as it were, as to how to approach being a tremendous real estate entrepreneur.
Yeah. I think it's all about the deal structure at the beginning. It's all about your acquisition, because you can weather lots of storms with the appropriate upfront financing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think getting that piece right is important. And for me, that piece is not only knowing lettuce and tomatoes and how to actually do a structure, but it's also about the relationship with the seller.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here looking at a piece of land with a seller I've bought 2 other properties from.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a great relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
I have consistently nurtured that relationship over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it starts with your relationship with the seller, the deal you structure, that has to work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
And then being creative about your approach. whatever it might be. I don't know that new ground up development is for everyone. It's a hard business. It's very unique, and I don't know that I would say everyone should do it. Although I feel like in this business, everyone wants to build from scratch. And I was like that too. But now I don't know that that's necessarily the right approach. For me now, it's much more about creating communities, creating spaces. And honestly, because you can't know all the pitfalls of the world, Toyotas, getting creative, being able to speak to lots of different audiences. I love beautiful things, so I tend to build luxury product. But in this market, our last project, that didn't serve me.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think working backwards from a well-stated, well-thought-out goal and objective, that what creates sustainability in this business is not just one leg of the stool. It's several legs of the stool, and one of those legs of the stool, I think, has to be cash flow and bread and butter, something that you can consistently do that keeps you in the game, to where when you want to create something that is exceptional and maybe a little over the top, it's not your business and your future is sustained by an RV park that throws out $10,000 a month, or something like this that's not nearly as creative and sexy, but it gives life to something that could take 2 years to just get design review.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I think it's all about your approach too, because I absolutely think the RV park can be sexy and it can be creative. And we've looked at and designed a bunch of models that are spectacular.
Yeah. Well, I have seen some things recently even that have just blown my mind in terms of combining passion and pure, just drippy passion with models that have a market and that are so creative and so community. I'll give you an example. Here's one that just literally blew my mind. I was with a power player in the Minneapolis area recently, and he said, we've got to tour this. You've got to see this because this is so unique. And we toured a facility of some of the most beautiful garages I've ever seen. And I mean, let's say 250 garages in a gated entry. You don't live there. Garages. Garage doors, man doors. But when the garage doors go up, these things are 1,000 to 3,000 square feet with big lofts that go around the top. And everybody that owns a garage, they're condominium garages, are car collectors. Every single one of them.
Sure.
I didn't know there were that many car collectors in the world. Well, right here, not only is this full, if any one of these garages ever comes available, nobody hears about it. Because so-and-so's friend has been on a waiting list forever and he buys it. Or the next door neighbor buys it so he can have 2 garages. Or it's so in demand that the developer who built this is now building another 250 of them 10 miles away.
Sure.
In another car collector only garages. So not only is the space beautiful, but then you open the door and there's $1 million of cars in one person's garage.
Yeah.
I mean, sprinkled the whole 9 yards. There's some money in these things, and security, and then the clubhouse where they all get together and have a scotch and talk cars.
Sure.
Amazing.
How cool.
Amazing. And it's just like, and I thought of you. I thought, oh my God, it's real estate meets community.
Yeah.
And demand. Amazing. Demand.
I just saw a very similar concept, but they had converted an old warehouse into artist lofts. And they had old, decrepit building, but so beautiful with these glass windows for miles. And they had condoed little spaces, and they basically sold the little condo spaces to individual artists.
Right.
And they opened the whole building once a month for a beautiful art walk, brought in music, couple wineries. You could like walk through and look at all the studios.
Right.
So cool.
Right. And this to me is where vision and style meet the technical deal structuring aspects of real estate.
Yep.
The slice and dice clause, the substitution of security clause, the ability to create one big block of money, but now condo it out and move it around and do this and that, and wrap notes, and private money meets, sales money. And all of these technical pieces are what assist in a vision like that, making it marketable, sustainable. Wow.
So cool.
Yeah. I'm in love with that and how it's married to the left brain side of deal structuring, which you said, that's if you get your financing right up front and all of the allowabilities you need in finance, that's a big part of the overall success equation in any entrepreneurial venture in real estate.
For sure.
Yeah, crazy. Wow.
For sure.
I kind of almost don't know where to take that one because it's such a high note. When you look at the next 20 years, let's just round off. You've been at this almost 20 now. Okay. When you look at the next 20 years, what would be the major adjustments going forward that you see yourself making as a real estate entrepreneur for the next 20 years, given the 20 under your belt right now?
Yeah, definitely the last 5 years and the last project has shifted my thinking a lot. I think there is a place for speculative development, but I don't want to be only in that world. I want to be able to hold something for the long haul, curate it, manage it, tend to the community that it creates. And so for me, I think it's development to hold is the direction. And in more creative environments, in more Toyotas, very unique, very cool RV parks, artist studios,
Yep.
man cave garages.
Right.
But that idea of like fusing together community and good design, creativity.
I think of let's take a really well-designed RV park with, community areas, gazebos, these sorts of things. And I think in terms of just the infrastructure of that, and it's like almost like when you backfill ditches and the graders are in, you're about 3 weeks away from being done, versus the years of engineering and design and vertical infrastructure and supply chains and contractor relations and contracts and liabilities and warranties and just this whole world that gets stacked onto vertical infrastructure. I so admire anyone who can take anything like that through the end process. I've done it, I understand it, and I know what it takes. But I look at something like an RV park and go, "Oh my God, we got the for rent signs coming up, and the bulldozer hasn't even left the site."
Yeah, the amount of undergrounds for our Seattle projects, the amount of detention ponds and filtration systems and all this stuff you have to put in. Yeah, you'd be done with the project by the time you got just out of the ground here.
Unbelievable. So I think that there's a lot to be said with it. Can be beautiful, but it can also be simple.
Yeah.
And this is that sweet spot. Where do you find that spot to make really, really good decisions? I don't know. See, you're so much younger than I am too, Lindy, but I'll tell you, the clock, as it winds down, you really start to be very selective with the projects because you realize the runway is getting shorter, and you go, okay, I've taken 8 years to build one house, and I go, do I really want to do that one again if I only have 15 years left?
Yeah.
I don't think I want to spend 8 building one house. I want to be productive but selective.
Yes.
And I think that's what comes with experience
Sure.
is that wisdom.
Well, and the reason why, ultimately we've opted not to build some projects.
Yeah. 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 Well, this is all in the journey, as they say, and
Learning.
I appreciate it. We had an event for many, many years in Las Vegas called the All-Star. I'm going to say, I think it was 7 or 8 years in a row we ran that, right up leading up to where COVID sort of stopped that gathering. But in all those years of having the best of the best up front, I know you were up front several times at the All-Star. And I've seen you present many, many times as a TA at Power Players. Anybody that sees how professional you put anything together, how complete, how articulate, how professional, has to be somewhat intimidated by all there is to know in this sport, because you know it, you process it, you present it. When you're sitting down with a property owner and you're negotiating the purchase of a piece of land or a home, is it fair to say that most of what's going on in your head stays in your head?
Oh, yeah.
Like 90% of it, maybe?
Or more.
Or more, right? And I think of one deal in particular that was very creative, and I'd like you to walk through some of the elements of it. It was a deal that I always say we, because I've been blessed to be your coach for many years, but a deal in Madison Valley that resulted in an option that you still have to buy this piece of real estate. But to me, the option and the technical pieces of it are the left brain parts that you're putting together, the puzzle pieces in your head. But really what drove the success of this was the relationship and the communication that you had and still have with the property owner. Can you walk through the elements of that deal for me?
Sure. It's a very unusual option in that, typically an option has it has consideration, it has a window, and it has a strike price. In this particular case, I approached it from wanting to help the homeowner. And he's an older single gentleman, lives in a lovely property, very good health, mentally very together. We used to be an engineer, very sharp. Wanted to stay in his home. But he didn't have kids. There was no place for this property to go in the future. So I asked him if he would sell me an option. And it took a while to negotiate some back and forth. But basically, we came up with a very creative out-of-the-box option that allows me to exercise the option upon his death. And we don't know when that's going to be. But what it does for him is it provides him monthly cash flow. So I pay him a monthly fee. That monthly fee is consideration. That allows him he has a personal trainer and a gardener. And he loves those things. And without my option payment, he couldn't afford those things.
Right.
So,
and this, in terms of the ultimate strike date, healthy food and a personal trainer, he might be around for a long time.
He could be around for another 20 years.
Which is a good thing for him. But your contribution is going against a fixed strike price
Correct.
that was established when this was put in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like a savings account to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a reverse mortgage, maybe.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I love that when assessing a situation, when you do dive into the personal aspects of people's lives, what are they trying to do? What are they wanting to do? Going to that vault of tools and sorting through the toolbox, going, this tool with a little variation here is going to work perfectly in this situation, and proposing that and having it be accepted and reviewed by everybody in the world, his attorney, your attorney, everybody's involved to draft it. But what a handcrafted win-win that now this is in the books. It's like you can drive by and go, well, I own that, just not quite yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fantastic, beautiful house in an absolute 10 location, right? So that's fantastic. In an area that, again, so well. I mean, didn't you meet him like walking your dogs in that area?
Pretty much.
Right. That right, 4 or 5 blocks from your own
Yeah.
house, right? So I think that too is knowing your neighborhood, really having a feel and a nuance and getting involved in your neighborhood. Sometimes the very, very best deals are right under your nose,
Yeah.
but we just tend to walk right by them. Waldo is right there in this picture, and you just walk right by him.
Right.
We're
And
too busy sometimes.
But I think it's just a matter of asking the question too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of deals by just being in a situation and asking of the question of proposition.
Right.
I remember that house behind a previous home that we lived in. I had never seen the owner in that house. I lived there many years. One day there was a young lady out cleaning the backyard, which was all overgrown. And I ran out to introduce myself, the nosy neighbor that I am. And she was a young attorney, and she was never there because she was always at the office. In fact, she told me she had a sofa. She slept in her office. And she had gotten a job opportunity in California. She was moving. She didn't know what to do with this house. She didn't have time to clean it up. There you go.
Here we are.
Here we are. She was an attorney. She even wrote up the...
But that's awareness. That's having a radar that says I'm seeing what's around me. Wow, I'm not. I wish there was like a pill that you could take to just say, there, now you see everything that's happening around you. But I think it's something that when you see the value of that, your eyes open up. We do some things at Power Players, and as you know, to try to just dispel myths that there's no opportunity there. Oh, opportunity is everywhere. It literally is everywhere. Let's just start asking the questions.
Well, let's talk for just a minute about awareness, because I feel like it's one of the things that I don't see in the world of real estate education. Everyone is buying lists and sending postcards, and there's a very rote kind of world out there that is not your or my world. And I think awareness is such a big part of that. Awareness of neighborhoods, awareness of zoning, awareness of sellers, personalities, little quirks, weeds growing out of the gutter.
Needs of a neighborhood. What does the community need? Where's the opportunity here? Because there's obviously a need for it. Yeah. Well, call that old school, but I can promise you, as you know, that the kind of terms that you just laid out in this option, for example, these aren't done, with a headset on a dial for dollars kind of call.
No.
They're not. They never will be.
I don't think I've never done a deal like that. They've all been a very careful relationship with a seller. And I would say that, most everyone that I've bought land from, I think all of them, I'm friends with today.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think of the project you just finished, and literally the couple years of meetings with that entire family that went on before they made a decision to sell that property. It was that pregame show of knowing them and communicating that brought you, that got you a seat at the table.
That's right.
And without that, there'd be no seat at the table.
Yeah.
So this but at the end of it, isn't this what is going to add up?
Yeah.
I get asked a lot, like, how many projects have I built? And, I think there was a day when I was young, I'd say, oh, exactly this number. I was very proud of how many buildings, how many units, this, that. And now I just go, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We could drive all day. I could tell you that. I don't know. But that's not, I'm starting to forget addresses.
Mm-hmm.
I could get there, but what I remember is I remember the conversations, the seller, the person, the negotiation. I can remember the subcontractors that worked on those sites with me.
Yeah.
And still do. It's the people. It's the after party when you're sitting out there in the pouring down rain. One of my favorite visions of you. I mean, truly, I'm sure I've never told you this, but wow, here we go. I don't know why we were all there, but there was a group of us. I want to say 3 or 4 of us staying at your Airbnb. I'm not even sure I was staying there. I think they were staying there, some power players, and I came to check in on them that night. But they were staying in your Airbnb house next to where you were living in Madison. And I think they all slept there, and I can picture a couple of them there. And I think I met them there to just connect with them or something. Maybe I stayed that night. I'm not sure. But what I remember is the next morning, I think I did stay the night. The next morning, you came in to just say goodbye to us all. And you had on literally overalls, some tennis shoes. You had a bucket full of cleaning supplies and mops and cleaning stuff. And you were heading over to 15th.
Yeah, we were just putting 15th on.
To clean.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, something happened with the cleaning crew, and you've got a big open house of 1 unit coming up in like a day, and there's no stopping the press there. And so here we go. And I remember you, so I got to go see you guys, and I remember you walking out. And I couldn't help it. I had to hold a little class because here's some young entrepreneurs. And I said, do you see that person that that just left? Did you take it all in? This is what it's all about. It's about, yeah, you just finished a $25 million building. But the same person was cleaning and bucketing in water to clean a unit because the main water line hadn't been hooked on yet. But we got to get it cleaned for the open house. There's something about that's what leadership is about. That's what entrepreneurship is about. That there's no task that I'm not too good to do any and everything. Whatever it takes is what you do. And I admire that. You're tough and you're smart and you get it done. To me, that's what being an entrepreneur, being self-employed is all about. Is sometimes you just dive into every corner of the business and you do whatever it takes. So I admire that, which is my segue, okay, to wrapping up our time. We always end with an ism or a consider this. And there's an evolution to this ism. And I want to give credit where credit was due. At one Power Player alumni, you were there, I'm certain of it, because you've been to every one. We wrote credos.
I still have mine.
Yeah, we wrote credos, like one-liners, like that say it all, a belief system, a directive, something you really want to get behind. And one of the credos that I read simply said, impress yourself. And I gave that a lot of thought. And so out of that, I so agreed with it that I wrote this idea that I don't push to impress somebody else. Matter of fact, trying to impress somebody else just slows me down. It gets in my way.
Yeah.
I push to impress myself. In other words, what am I most capable of?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, you're so humble, and you can, and maybe it's we both have a tiny bit of introvert in us. You can kind of just blend into a crowd. But every time I see you in that crowd, I grab who's next to me and go, you see that girl right there? Wow, she's impressive. But you don't do it to impress anybody else. You do it to show yourself something. And to me, that to me is such a measure of success. Don't do it to impress somebody else. You know whether this was your best effort. You know whether you gave it everything you had. You know, did I leave it all on the playing field? And sometimes only you know. Because when you get good at it, you think, oh, that's so impressive. And you go, yeah, well, that was like my 50% effort. Only you really know. But I can tell because I feel like I know you that well. What I've always seen is your very, very best effort. Details matter. And you press to impress yourself. I think that's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
So you caught a flight to be here in this little stage, and I appreciate it. And now I get to take you to go have some dinner. Sound good?
Sounds amazing. Let's do that.
Let's do that. A lot to toast. Thank you, Lindy. And thank you for being with us again at this podcast. God bless you. Until next time.